think I'm losing my mind over a woman who doesn't even like me.
I think I'm losing my mind over a woman who doesn't even like me. The silence that followed those words was the kind that fills a room completely and refuses to leave. Park Sung-jin set down his glass slowly. He didn't speak. He didn't move. He just stared at the man sitting across from him like he was genuinely trying to determine whether he had heard correctly or whether 14 years of high-pressure living had finally made him start hallucinating. Because Kim Jae-won did not say things like that. Kim Jae-won did not say things like that ever. The two of them were alone in the private lounge on the 39th floor of KJW Tower. Chicago glittered below them like scattered diamonds. Jae-won's empire stretched across 4 continents. His net worth had 11 digits. His name alone opened doors that governments couldn't unlock. He had built everything from nothing with nothing but his mind, his nerve, and a ruthlessness that had made grown men leave rooms rather than negotiate against him. And he was sitting here, in the dark, confessing this. Say that again, Sung-jin said carefully. Jae-won didn't repeat himself. He picked up his glass, looked out at the city, and said nothing else for a long moment, which somehow made it worse. Because when Kim Jae-won went quiet about something, it meant it was already past the point of being dismissed. Sung-jin leaned forward slowly. Who is she? Jae-won's jaw tightened. Just slightly. Just enough for Sung-jin to notice, because he had spent 14 years learning to read the millimeter differences in this man's expressions. A caterer, Jae-won said. Sung-jin blinked. A caterer. Her name is Amanda Okafor. Nigerian. 29 years old. Owns a small catering business on the south side. No connections to anyone we know. No angle. No agenda. He paused, and something shifted almost imperceptibly behind his eyes. She has absolutely no idea what I actually am. Sung-jin studied his face for a long time. In 14 years, he had watched this man close billion-dollar deals without blinking. He had watched him make decisions in 30 seconds that other men would agonize over for weeks. He had watched him walk out of situations that should have destroyed him completely, dust himself off, and rebuild before anyone realized he had even stumbled. He had never seen this expression on him before. It wasn't infatuation exactly. It was something deeper and more unsettling than that. It was the look of a man encountering something his entire life had not prepared him for. Something he couldn't strategize around. Something he couldn't acquire or neutralize or simply decide to walk away from. And she doesn't like you, Sung-jin said slowly. Jae-won looked at him. She doesn't think about me at all, he said. That's the problem. Now let's go back 3 weeks. Because you need to understand exactly what kind of man Kim Jae-won was before Amanda Okafor walked into his life. You need to feel the full weight of what those words cost him. A man like that, sitting in the dark, saying those words out loud for the first time. You need to understand what that actually means. Kim Jae-won did not become a billionaire by accident, and he did not become one cleanly. On the surface, KJW Global was an immaculate empire. Real estate portfolios across Chicago, Seoul, Lagos, and Dubai. A tech investment arm that had produced 3 unicorn startups in 5 years. A private logistics company that moved goods across 12 countries with a precision that had industry analysts writing think pieces about his operational genius. Forbes had featured him twice. The mayor of Chicago had shaken his hand publicly on more than one occasion. He donated to hospitals. He funded scholarships for first-generation college students. He was, by every visible and photographable measure, a self-made success story that people pointed to as proof that the system could work. But surfaces exist precisely because of what they are hiding underneath. The men who actually built Chicago's underground economy knew Jae-won by a different name. Not the one on the Forbes list. The one that got spoken in certain warehouses, certain back rooms, certain conversations that only happened after phones had been removed from the table and doors had been checked twice. In those circles, he wasn't a tech investor or a real estate mogul. He was the man who controlled the flow. Import routes that nobody asked too many questions about. Distribution networks that ran beneath the legitimate ones like a shadow system. Protection arrangements that kept certain businesses operating without interference from people who would otherwise make their lives very difficult. He had built that side of his world the same way his early mentors in Seoul had taught him, with patience, surgical precision, and the kind of quiet violence that never made the news because it never needed to. He was not a man who lost control. That was not a preference. It was a survival requirement. He decided what he wanted. He moved toward it. He took it. He moved on. That was the entire system. That was how everything in his life operated, and it had never once failed him. Women were no different. When he wanted company, he arranged it. It was enjoyed and then concluded with the same clean efficiency as a business transaction. Nobody developed expectations because he made the terms clear from the beginning. He had no interest in love, no interest in anything that required him to be vulnerable or inconsistent or emotionally available. His empire was his only real relationship, and it demanded 100% of everything he had. This was the man who stepped off the elevator on a Tuesday morning 3 weeks ago and stopped walking because a woman in a catering uniform was arguing with his security guard, and there was absolutely nothing in her voice that suggested she was even slightly intimidated by where she was. Amanda Okafor had been awake since 4:30 that morning. She had prepped 40 portions of jollof rice the way her mother taught her, with the tomatoes blended fresh and the smoky undertone that came from patience and the right heat. 20 portions of egusi soup, a full spread of small chops that had taken her 2 hours alone just to plate properly. She had loaded everything into her van in the pre-dawn dark, driven across a city that was still mostly asleep, and was now standing in the most aggressively expensive lobby she had ever set foot in, being told by a man with an earpiece and a superiority complex that her work order needed verification. Amanda looked at him with the specific expression of a woman who had exactly 0 minutes for this. She had 2 more deliveries after this one. A staff member had called in sick at 6 a.m. Her business account was sitting at a balance that made her stomach tight every time she checked it, and she checked it more than she should. And her mother back in Lagos called every single Sunday expecting to hear that everything was wonderful and growing and worth all the sacrifice. And Amanda always said, "Yes, Mama. Everything is fine," because what was the alternative? She had not left Lagos at 24 years old. She had not worked 3 jobs simultaneously for 2 years while building Okafor Kitchen out of her apartment kitchen with secondhand equipment and a catering license she had saved 4 months to afford. She had not done all of that to stand in a marble lobby and be made to feel like she was in the wrong place by a man whose entire job was to stand still and look serious. "Sir," she said, with the careful, measured patience of someone making a deliberate choice not to raise their voice. "I have a work order with a verified signature. I have a confirmed booking reference number. And I have 40 portions of food that need to be on the 40th floor in the next 18 minutes before your boss walks into a lunch meeting with nothing on the table. So I need you to tell me right now, are you going to resolve this, or are you going to be the person who made that happen?" The guard opened his mouth and then closed it. A voice from behind her said quietly, "Let her through." Amanda turned. There was a tall Korean man standing about 10 feet away. Expensive suit. Calm face. The kind of stillness that didn't come from relaxation, but from complete control. She registered him, gave him a single nod of acknowledgement, turned back to the guard, said, "Thank you," picked up her tray and walked toward the elevator without another word or a second glance. Kim Jae-won watched her go. In 34 years of life, in every boardroom and back room, and every variation of room that existed between legitimate and otherwise, nobody had ever looked at him like that. Not with disrespect, not with fear, not with the wide-eyed recognition that most people couldn't suppress when they realized who he was. Just a clean, functional glance. Noted. Irrelevant. Moving on. Like he was just a person in a lobby. He stood there for 3 full seconds after she disappeared around the corner. 3 seconds during which Minho appeared at his elbow with a tablet and a reminder about Seoul, and Jae-won heard none of it. "Find out who she is," he said. And that was how it started. If this story already has you feeling something, you are exactly where you are supposed to be. Hit that like button right now, subscribe if you have not already, and drop a comment telling me where in the world are you watching this from. I want to know where my people are. Now stay with me because what happens next changes everything. Minho delivered his report the following morning with the quiet efficiency that made him indispensable. Amanda Okafor, born in Lagos, Nigeria, 29 years old, moved to Chicago 5 years ago on a work visa that she had since converted to permanent residency. Degree in hospitality management from the University of Lagos. No criminal record. No debt beyond normal business operating costs. No social media presence beyond a simple Instagram page for Okafor Kitchen that had 4,000 followers and was filled with nothing but food photographs and the occasional behind-the-scenes video of her cooking. No connections to any of their networks. No family in Chicago. No boyfriend currently on record. No angle that Minho could identify after 12 hours of thorough investigation. She was exactly what she appeared to be. A hardworking woman running a small catering business on the south side of Chicago, trying to build something from nothing in a city that made that very difficult. Jae-won read through the file twice. Then he sat back and looked at the ceiling for a moment. "That's everything?" he asked. "Yes, sir," Minho said. "She's completely clean." Clean. The word landed strangely. In Jae-won's world, almost nobody was completely clean. Everyone had something. An agenda, a connection, a debt, a secret they were managing. The people around him operated in layers. You learned the surface, then you peeled it back, then you found what was actually underneath, and that was who you were really dealing with. Amanda Okafor apparently had no layers. What you saw was what was there. He found that more fascinating than anything else in the file. "She has another booking," he said. It wasn't a question. He had already seen it in the file. Okafor Kitchen had been tentatively shortlisted for a corporate event KJW Global was hosting in 3 weeks. "Yes, sir." The events team reached out to 3 vendors. "She's one of them." "Confirm her," Jae-won said. Minho paused for exactly half a second. The other two vendors have more corporate experience, sir. Chin's Fusion in particular has handled 6 of our previous. Confirm Okafor Kitchen, J1 said. Minho wrote it down. Yes, sir. Amanda got the confirmation email on a Thursday afternoon while she was elbow deep in prep work for a birthday party booking. She read it twice on her phone screen, set the phone down, picked it up, and read it again. KJW Global. Corporate dinner. 200 guests. It was the biggest single booking Okafor Kitchen had ever received. The number at the bottom of the contract made her sit down on her kitchen stool and stare at the wall for a full minute. Her friend and only part-time employee Chisholm leaned over her shoulder and read the screen. Then she screamed, Amanda, do you understand what this is? Keep your voice down, Amanda said automatically, even though they were alone. This is KJW Global. Do you know who Kim Jae-won is? He's on Forbes. He's been on Forbes twice. His building is the one with the whole glass situation on Michigan Avenue. I know which building it is, Chisholm. I was just in that building on Tuesday. Chisholm grabbed her arm. You were in his building, and you didn't tell me? I was delivering food. It wasn't an event. Amanda looked at the contract again. The number hadn't changed. This is a real opportunity. If we execute this perfectly, it changes everything for us. We get the right reviews from the right people at this event, and we move into a completely different client bracket. So we're doing it, Chisholm said. We're doing it, Amanda confirmed. And we're doing it perfectly. Which means I need you to stop screaming and help me figure out how we staff this. Chisholm was already on her phone. I'm looking him up. Kim Jae-won. Oh, Amanda. Oh, he is. She turned the phone around. Look at him. Amanda glanced at the screen. The man from the lobby looked back at her from a Forbes profile photograph. Same controlled stillness. Same expensive suit. Same eyes that suggested he was always calculating something. He's the one who let me through on Tuesday, Amanda said. Chisholm's mouth fell open. He personally let you through? Amanda, that man does not personally do anything. He has people for everything. Amanda shrugged and went back to her prep work. He was in the lobby. I needed to get through. It wasn't a moment, Chisholm, it was a Tuesday morning. Chisholm stared at her. Sometimes I genuinely cannot understand you. Have you ever worked so hard for something, and then the opportunity finally showed up, but you had no idea it came with strings attached? Drop a comment below. And if you are not subscribed yet, do it now because this story is about to get very complicated. Let's keep going. The corporate dinner was on a Friday evening, and Amanda arrived 4 hours early. She had been awake since 3 a.m. She had triple-checked every single component of the menu. She had pressed her staff uniforms herself. She had tasted every dish at least twice and adjusted seasoning with the focused intensity of someone who understood that this evening was not just a job. It was an audition for a different version of her future. The event was on the 40th floor, the same floor she had delivered to on Tuesday. The space had been transformed into something that looked like it belonged in an architectural magazine. Long tables, low lighting, flowers that probably cost more than her monthly rent per arrangement. Amanda moved through the space with her team like a unit, setting up stations, checking temperatures, running through timing sequences she had rehearsed so many times they were muscle memory now. She didn't look up much. She didn't need to. She knew what needed to happen and when, and she trusted herself to execute it. She did not notice when Jae-won walked in. She was adjusting a serving station when Sung-jin appeared beside her seemingly from nowhere. She startled slightly, which she hated, and looked up at a broad-shouldered Korean man with an amused expression and the relaxed confidence of someone who was used to being in rooms like this. You must be Amanda Okafor, he said. The food already smells like something that's going to make the evening memorable. That's the intention, Amanda said, returning to her adjustment. Is there something you need, sir? We're still setting up. Just wanted to introduce myself. Park Sung-jin. I work closely with Mr. Kim. Amanda straightened and looked at him properly. Everything will be ready before the first guests arrive. The menu was approved 2 weeks ago and nothing has changed. Is there a concern I should know about? Sung-jin smiled. It was a genuine smile which surprised her. No concern at all. I just came to see if the woman who ignored my boss in his own lobby was as interesting up close. Amanda blinked. Then she looked across the room. Kim Jae-won was standing near the entrance talking to 2 men in suits. He wasn't looking in her direction, or he appeared not to be looking in her direction. She turned back to Sung-jin. I didn't ignore anyone. I acknowledged him, thanked him, and went to do my job. That's what I mean, Sung-jin said pleasantly. That's exactly what I mean. He straightened his jacket. Enjoy your evening, Ms. Okafor. I have a feeling it will be interesting. He walked away before she could respond. Amanda stared after him for a moment. Then she pushed it out of her mind entirely and went back to work because she had a dinner to run and she did not have the bandwidth for whatever that conversation was supposed to be. The evening went perfectly. Every dish landed exactly as intended. The guests were vocal about it in the way that well-fed, well-dressed people get vocal. Not loudly, but consistently, leaning toward each other over the tables, flagging down her staff to ask questions about specific dishes That particular quality of satisfied murmuring that a caterer learns to recognize as the highest possible compliment. Amanda allowed herself exactly one moment of quiet satisfaction around the halfway point of the evening. She stood at the edge of the service area and looked at the room and thought, we did this. Okafor Kitchen did this. The agusi soup, a voice said beside her. She turned. Kim Jae-won was standing 2 feet away from her, not looking at her, looking at the room the same way she had been doing, with that same quality of assessment in his gaze. What about it? She said, because apparently this was just a thing that was happening now. I don't eat agusi soup, he said. I had it tonight because my assistant put it on the approved menu, and I didn't look closely enough. I was planning to leave it. A pause. I didn't leave it. Amanda looked at him. Is that a compliment, Mr. Kim? He turned and looked at her then, directly, for the first time since she had been in his building. Up close his eyes were darker than she expected, more tired than a man of his apparent confidence had any right to look. It's an observation, he said. You're very good at what you do. I know, Amanda said simply. Something shifted in his expression. Just barely. Just enough. I'd like to book your company for a private dinner, he said. Next week. 8 guests. My penthouse. Amanda held his gaze for a moment. Send the request through our booking system. My assistant will handle the details. She picked up her clipboard and walked back to her team. Behind her, Jae-won watched her go for the second time in 2 weeks. Sung-jin appeared at his shoulder from apparently nowhere. Well, he said quietly. She told me to use the booking system, Jae-won said. Sung-jin pressed his lips together very hard. I see. She's remarkable, Jae-won said. And there was something in his voice when he said it that Sung-jin had genuinely never heard before. Something unguarded. Something real. It made Sung-jin deeply, instinctively uneasy. Because in their world, real feelings were not assets. They were vulnerabilities. And vulnerabilities got people killed. If this story is pulling you in, hit that like button right now and subscribe so you never miss a single episode. Because what happens at that private dinner next week? That is where everything starts to crack open. Stay with me. Amanda almost didn't take the private dinner booking. She sat with the request form open on her laptop for a full 20 minutes on a Sunday evening, cursor hovering, telling herself she was just thinking through the logistics. 8 guests. Penthouse location. Premium menu. The number on the booking form was not a number she could afford to turn down. Okafor Kitchen's account balance was still doing that thing that made her stomach tight, and her mother's Sunday calls feel heavier than they should. It was just a job. She had done private dinners before. Smaller ones, less prestigious ones, but the principle was identical. You showed up, you cooked, you delivered an experience, you went home. She confirmed the booking. She told herself it had everything to do with the money and nothing to do with anything else. She was very convincing. The penthouse was on the 52nd floor of a residential tower 3 blocks from KJW Tower, and it was the most quietly overwhelming space Amanda had ever stood in. Not overwhelming in a loud way. There were no gold fixtures or obvious displays of wealth. It was overwhelming in the way that true money always was, in the restraint of it. Everything in that apartment had been chosen with the kind of deliberate precision that communicated absolute confidence. Floor-to-ceiling windows. Furniture that was minimal and perfect. Art on the walls that Amanda suspected cost more than most people's houses. A kitchen that was bigger than her entire apartment and equipped with tools she recognized from professional cooking magazines. She read the way other people read novels. She stood in that kitchen at 4 in the afternoon, 3 hours before guests were due, and allowed herself exactly 5 seconds to feel the full weight of where she was. Then she tied her apron, turned on the stove, and went to work. She was deep in her prep, moving between stations with the focused rhythm that cooking always gave her, when she heard footsteps behind her. You came early, Jae-won said. Amanda didn't turn around immediately. She finished the step she was on, set down her knife, and then looked over her shoulder. He was standing at the kitchen entrance in a much simpler outfit than she had seen him in before. Dark trousers, a plain shirt with the sleeves rolled up. He looked less like a Forbes cover and more like an actual human being. She wasn't sure which version was more dangerous. I always come early, she said. 4 hours minimum for an event this size. Your kitchen has everything I needed, so prep has been straightforward. He walked in slowly, the way people move in spaces they own completely, and stopped at the island across from her station. What are you making? Seared sea bass with a palm oil beurre blanc, jollof rice done a specific way that I won't fully explain, and a pepper soup that your guest will be talking about for 2 weeks. He raised an eyebrow slightly. That confident. That precise, she said, and went back to her work. He didn't leave. He stood at the island and watched her cook with an expression she couldn't fully read because she wasn't looking at him directly, only catching him in her peripheral vision. It should have been uncomfortable. A billionaire standing in his own kitchen watching her work. But Amanda had cooked under pressure her entire life. Her mother had been her first and harshest critic. She had cooked in tiny hot kitchens with broken equipment and impossible deadlines. A A silent man watching from across the island was not going to dismantle her concentration. "You're not uncomfortable," he said after a while. It sounded almost like an accusation. "Should I be?" she asked without looking up. A pause. "Most people are. In this apartment. Most people probably come here wanting something from you," Amanda said evenly. "I already have a contract. Everything I need from you is already in writing." The silence that followed that statement had a particular quality to it. She finally looked up. He was watching her with that expression again. The one she had seen briefly at the corporate dinner. That barely perceptible shift behind his eyes that she couldn't name. "Why did you move to Chicago?" he asked. Amanda looked at him steadily. "Is this part of the booking, Mr. Kim? Because I don't recall conversation being on the menu." Something that was almost a smile crossed his face. "Almost. Consider it small talk. I moved here for opportunity," she said simply. "Lagos is home. Chicago is where I could build what I wanted to build. Are there other questions, or can I get back to your dinner?" He straightened slightly. "I'll leave you to work." "Thank you," she said, and turned back to her stove. She didn't hear him leave, but she felt the room change when he was gone. Like pressure releasing. She stood there for a moment and breathed slowly, and then told herself very firmly that whatever that was, it was not her concern. She was here to cook. She cooked. She left. That was the arrangement. The dinner was exceptional, and everyone in that room knew it. The 8 guests were the kind of people who had eaten in every significant restaurant in the world and had developed the refined indifference of those who are rarely surprised by food anymore. By the second course, that indifference had dissolved. By the pepper soup, there were actual exclamations. A woman in a red dress grabbed Amanda's arm as she was clearing plates and said, "I need you at my daughter's wedding in April. Whatever you charge, I will pay it," and pressed a business card into her hand before Amanda could respond. From across the table, Jae-won watched this interaction. Sung-jin was seated beside him and leaned over quietly. "She just got a wedding booking from Elena Marchetti." Jae-won said nothing. Elena Marchetti, who has never in 15 years of me knowing her complimented anyone's cooking. "I know who Elena Marchetti is, Sung-jin. I'm just observing," Sung-jin said mildly, and returned to his food. After the guests left, Amanda and her small team moved through the cleanup with the efficient choreography of people who had done this many times. She was wrapping the last of her equipment when Jae-won came back into the kitchen. Her team had already gone down to the van. She was alone. "Your team left," he said. "They have the van. I'll take a car." She kept moving, efficient and focused. "Everything is packed and cleaned. You'll find the kitchen exactly as I found it. The leftover seed base is wrapped in the fridge. It won't keep past tomorrow, but it reheats well with a low heat." "Amanda." She stopped. It was the first time he had used her name. She wasn't sure when he had learned it, though of course he had it on the contract. She turned around. He was standing closer than she expected. Not inappropriately close, but close enough that she could see how tired his eyes actually were. Not the tiredness of someone who needed sleep. The deeper kind. The kind that sleep doesn't fix. Tonight was, he stopped. Started again. "Thank you. You're paying me," she said. "You don't need to thank me." "I know," he said. "I'm thanking you anyway." She studied him for a moment. Just a moment. There was something in his face right then that she didn't have a category for. Something that didn't match the Forbes profile, or the KJW Tower lobby, or the 52-floor penthouse. Something that looked, very briefly, like loneliness. She picked up her last bag. "Good night, Mr. Kim," she said quietly. And she meant it with more gentleness than she intended. She left. In the empty kitchen, Jae-won stood completely still for a long time. The city moved 40 floors below him. His phone had 17 unread messages. 3 of them were flagged urgent by Minho's system, which meant they were actually urgent, and not simply Minho's anxiety presenting itself as urgency. He didn't look at any of them. He thought about the way she moved in his kitchen, like she owned the space more completely than he did, like she was at home inside herself in a way that had nothing to do with where she physically was. He had met heads of state who didn't carry themselves like that. He thought about what she had said. "Most people probably come here wanting something from you." She was right. Every single person in his life wanted something from him. That was the architecture of his existence. Transactions dressed as relationships. Loyalty purchased and maintained. Even Sung-jin, his most trusted person, was bound to him by shared history and mutual necessity as much as genuine feeling. Amanda Okafor had come to his penthouse, cooked the best meal his guests had eaten in years, told him to send booking requests through her system, deflected every attempt at conversation with calm precision, and left. She wanted nothing from him. He had no idea what to do with that. And for a man who always knew exactly what to do, that feeling was the most disorienting thing he had experienced in years. He picked up his phone, looked at the 17 messages, put it back down. He was in serious trouble, and he knew it. But here is the thing about serious trouble when you are Kim Jae-won. It doesn't arrive alone. It never does. While he was standing in his kitchen thinking about a woman who cooked like she was feeding people's souls, 3 blocks away in a parked car outside KJW Tower, a man was making a phone call. The man's name was Victor Malov. and he had been watching the comings and goings of KJW Tower for 11 days. She was there again tonight, Victor said into the phone. The caterer. Okafor. The voice on the other end was quiet for a moment. Is he interested in her? Victor watched the building. He's more than interested. Another pause. Then she becomes useful, the voice said. Find out everything about her. And Victor, be subtle. We don't want Kim spooked before we're ready. Victor ended the call and looked up at the lights of the penthouse 52 floors above him. Somewhere in the city, Amanda Okafor was in a car going home, thinking about leftover sea base and a wedding booking from a woman in a red dress and a man with tired eyes who had said thank you like he genuinely meant it. She had no idea that her name had just entered a conversation that had nothing to do with food and everything to do with danger. Did you feel that shift? Because everything just changed and Amanda doesn't even know it yet. Hit that like button if this story has you on the edge of your seat. Subscribe if you haven't already, and drop a comment. Do you think Amanda should run or stay? Let me know what you think, because we are just getting started. J1 sent the third booking request on a Wednesday morning. The first had been the corporate dinner. The second had been the penthouse dinner. This one was different. There were no guests listed. No event description. Just a date, a time, and a note that said, private lunch. 2 people. Penthouse. Amanda stared at the request form for a long time. Chisholm was sitting across from her in their small shared office space, pretending to work on invoices, but actually watching Amanda's face with the focused attention of someone reading a very interesting book. What is it? Chisholm finally asked. Amanda turned the laptop around. Chisholm read it. Then she read it again. Then she looked up. 2 people. 2 people, Amanda confirmed. Amanda, that man is not booking a caterer for a lunch for 2 people. People do not hire a catering company for 2 people. You make a sandwich. You order in. You do not contact Okafor Kitchen and fill out a formal booking request for. Chisholm looked at the screen again, and her eyes went wide at the number. Amanda, I see the number, Chisholm. That is not a catering fee. That is a... Chisholm lowered her voice even though they were alone. That is a very clear communication. Amanda closed the laptop. It's a booking. I'm a caterer. I cook. That's what I do. You cook, Chisholm repeated flatly. For a billionaire. Alone. In his penthouse. For lunch. If you're implying something, say it directly. Chisholm held up both hands. I'm not implying anything. I'm just asking you to be honest with yourself about what is actually happening here, because I love you, and I don't want you to walk into something without your eyes open. Amanda was quiet for a moment. She was already being honest with herself. She had been being honest with herself since the night of the penthouse dinner when she had sat in the back of a car going home and replayed that last moment in the kitchen more times than she should have. The way he said her name. The tiredness in his eyes that looked like something much older than exhaustion. She was being honest with herself. She just wasn't sure the honest version of events was something she was ready to say out loud yet. I'll take the booking, she said. And I'll go alone. And I'll cook lunch for 2 people, and I'll come home. That's all. Chisholm looked at her for a long moment. Okay, she said finally. Just be careful, Amanda. Men like that don't operate simply. Everything they do has a layer underneath it. Amanda nodded and reopened her laptop. She thought about that word. Layer. She had been thinking about it herself, actually, in quiet moments when she let herself think about things she normally kept neatly filed away. There was something about Kim Jae-won that didn't fully add up. The way certain people moved around him. The way Sung-jin had appeared at the corporate dinner, not quite like a colleague, but like a protector. The way security responded to him, not just with professional deference, but with something closer to vigilance. The way his name produced a specific quality of silence in people who recognized it. She had looked him up properly after the penthouse dinner. The Forbes articles were there. The philanthropy pages were there. The real estate deals and tech investments were there. But there were also gaps. The kind of gaps that existed not because information was absent, but because it had been carefully managed. She had a degree in hospitality, not investigation. But she had grown up in Lagos, and she had learned early that the most dangerous men were always the ones whose surfaces were the most immaculate. She confirmed the booking. She told herself again it was just about the money. She was significantly less convincing this time. The lunch was on a Saturday. Amanda arrived at noon with enough food for 6 people because cooking for 2 felt wrong in her hands, and she always prepared abundance. She let herself into the penthouse with the access code Minho had sent, which itself said something about the level of trust being extended whether she acknowledged it or not. She was at the stove 40 minutes in when Jae-won appeared. Casual again. The same rolled sleeves. She was beginning to think it was a deliberate choice, that version of him. Like he was showing her something. You're early again, he said. I'm always early, she said. Sit down if you're staying in here. I need to move around this kitchen freely, and you're in my way. He sat. At the island. Same spot as last time. And they fell into something that Amanda didn't have a clean name for. He asked her questions, and she answered some and deflected others, and asked her own questions back, and he answered some and deflected others, and somewhere in the middle of all of that a conversation happened that felt nothing like what it technically was. What made you choose food, he asked. My mother. Amanda said without hesitation. She cooked like it was a language. Like she could say things with food she couldn't say any other way. I grew up understanding that. Wanting to do it myself. She plated something and slid it across the island to him without ceremony. He looked down at it. Looked up at her. Try it, she said. Tell me what you taste. He ate. Slowly. With more attention than people usually gave food. She watched him without appearing to watch him. Something warm, he said finally. And something underneath that's almost sad. Amanda went very still for just a moment. Then she turned back to the stove. That's the Uziza leaf, she said evenly. It has a bitter undertone. Most people don't catch it. I caught it, he said. I know, she said quietly. That's why I'm telling you what it is. The silence after that was different from the other silences. Softer. More dangerous in a completely different way. Why don't you want anything from me, he asked. Amanda turned around and leaned against the counter and looked at him directly. Because I don't need anything from you. I have what I need. I'm building what I don't have yet. Your money helps my business. That's the transaction. That's all it needs to be. And if I want it to be more than that, he said. Quietly. Directly. No game in his voice. Just the question. Amanda held his gaze. Then you'd need to be honest with me about who you actually are, she said. All of it. Not the Forbes version. The air in that kitchen changed completely. His expression didn't collapse. It didn't shift dramatically. But something behind his eyes moved in a way that told her the arrow had landed exactly where she intended it to. She had not imagined the gaps in his public profile. She had not imagined the specific quality of fear in people who recognized his name. She was not imagining this. That's a complicated conversation, he said. I know, she said. Which is why we're not having it today. She turned back to the stove. Lunch will be ready in 10 minutes. He sat there looking at the back of her, and for the first time in a very long time Kim Jae-won felt something he recognized distantly as fear. Not the physical kind. Not the kind that came from genuine threat. He had navigated that his entire adult life without flinching. This was different. This was the fear of being truly seen by someone and found to be exactly what you suspected yourself to be. She already knew. She didn't know the specifics, but she knew the shape of it. And she was still here. Still cooking his lunch. Still sliding plates across the island and telling him what he was tasting. He didn't know what to do with that either. What he did not know, what neither of them knew as they sat across from each other in that penthouse eating lunch with a careful circling of two people trying to understand what was actually happening between them, was that the conversation was already being reported. Victor Malov was patient. Patience was his primary professional virtue. He had spent 11 days establishing surveillance before making a single move. He now had eyes on the penthouse building. He had a contact inside KJW Tower's events coordination team who had provided Amanda's booking details without understanding what they were providing them for. He had a comprehensive file on Amanda Okafor that was more thorough than even Minho's. And he was building a picture. The picture was this: Kim Jae-won, who had never in 14 years of operating in Chicago shown a personal vulnerability of any kind, had found one. Her name was Amanda Okafor. She was a civilian. No protection. No awareness of the world she had wandered adjacent to. No understanding of what it meant to be noticed by the people who watched Kim Jae-won the way predators watch the strong, waiting for the moment they show a weakness. Victor sent his update to the man who was paying him. The response came back in 4 words. Bring her to me. Victor looked at the words for a moment. Then he typed back, timeline? The response was immediate. Asterisk, you have 2 weeks. Don't damage her. She's more useful intact. Asterisk. Victor put his phone away and looked up at the penthouse windows far above him. Inside, a woman who had no idea any of this existed was washing dishes in a billionaire's kitchen and arguing pleasantly about whether pepper soup required goat meat or could be respected without it. 2 weeks. Meanwhile, Jae-won was losing the argument about the goat meat. You cannot tell me that pepper soup without goat meat is real pepper soup, he said, and then stopped, because he had not expected to be saying that sentence. He had not expected to be having this conversation. He had not expected to be sitting at his own kitchen island on a Saturday afternoon genuinely invested in a debate about soup. Amanda pointed her spoon at him with calm authority. Pepper soup is about the broth, the spice blend, the patience. The protein is secondary. I have made pepper soup with fish, with chicken, with mushrooms for a client who didn't eat meat, and every single time it was real pepper soup because the soul of the dish was correct. The soul of the dish, he repeated. Yes, she said simply. Food has a soul. If you cook it right, you can taste it. You tasted it earlier, remember? The Uziza leaf. He looked at her. She was standing at his stove in his penthouse kitchen like she belonged there more than any other place she had ever been, and she had absolutely no idea what she did to the entire architecture of his self-control simply by existing in his space and being completely unbothered by him. I remember, he said. She looked up and caught him looking at her, and for one unguarded moment neither of them looked away. Then her phone buzzed on the counter. She glanced at it. Something crossed her face. I have to go, she said. I'm sorry. Family thing. She was already untying her apron. Already moving with that efficiency that he had noticed was her default setting when she was shutting something down. Is everything all right? He asked. She paused, looked at him, and something in his voice must have registered as genuine because her expression softened by a fraction. My mother. She's not sick or anything. She calls, and sometimes the calls are harder than other times. She said it simply, without performing the vulnerability, just stating a fact. I understand that, Jae-won said quietly. Something passed between them in that sentence. A recognition. A small shared weight. I'll send the invoice Monday, Amanda said. She picked up her bag. The leftover soup is on the stove. Low heat for 10 minutes. Don't let it boil. She was at the kitchen doorway when he said her name again. Amanda. She turned. Next time, he said carefully, I'd like to tell you something true. She looked at him for a long moment. Her expression was unreadable in the way that only very intelligent people can make their expressions unreadable. Next time, she said finally. Make sure you're ready to. And she left. Jae-won sat alone in his kitchen for a long time after that. The soup simmered on the stove. The city moved outside his windows. Somewhere below him, without knowing it, Amanda Okafor was being watched by people who intended to use her against him. And somewhere across the city a man named Victor Malov was counting down 14 days. Everything is about to break open, and Amanda still has no idea what world she has walked into. If this story has you gripped right now, hit that like button, subscribe if you are not already, and tell me in the comments, do you think Jae-won will tell her the truth in time? Because the clock is already running. Stay with me. The call came on a Tuesday. Amanda was in the middle of prepping for a corporate lunch booking when her phone rang with a number she didn't recognize. She almost didn't answer it. She had a rule about unknown numbers during prep hours. But something made her pick up. She would think about that later. The smallness of the moment that changed everything. Amanda Okafor, the voice said. It was male, accented in a way she couldn't immediately place. Calm in the specific way that people are calm when they want you to understand that they are in control of the situation. Yes, she said carefully. Who is this? My name isn't important right now. What's important is that you listen very carefully to what I'm about to tell you. A pause. We know you've been spending time with Kim Jae-won. We know about the dinners, the penthouse, the Saturday lunch. We know about the conversation in the kitchen. Amanda's hand tightened on the phone. She didn't speak. We need you to do something for us, the voice continued. Something simple. The next time you're in his penthouse, we need you to leave a small device in the kitchen. That's all. You won't even know what it does. You just place it and you leave and none of this touches you. And if I don't, Amanda said. Her voice was steady. She was proud of that. Then certain immigration authorities received some very interesting information about some inconsistencies in your residency documentation. Another pause. We've been thorough, Ms. Okafor. We always are. The line went dead. Amanda stood in the middle of her kitchen holding her phone and breathing slowly and deliberately the way she had learned to breathe in difficult moments. In through the nose, out through the mouth. Don't let the panic set before you've had a chance to think. Her residency documentation. She ran through it in her mind quickly. Everything was in order. She had paid a good immigration lawyer 3 years ago to make absolutely sure everything was in order because she understood what it meant to be a Nigerian woman building a life in America, and she had taken no chances. Everything was correct. But correct and easily confused were two different things. And she understood without needing it spelled out that a man who had been watching her closely enough to know about conversations in a private penthouse kitchen had the resources to create problems where no real problems existed. She sat down on her kitchen stool. She thought about Chisholm's words. Men like that don't operate simply. Everything they do has a layer underneath it. She had assumed Chisholm meant Jae-won. Now she understood there were other men entirely. Men she hadn't even known to think about. She thought about the gaps in Jae-won's public profile. The specific quality of fear in people who recognized his name. The way Sung-jin moved around him like a protector rather than a colleague. She thought about every small thing she had noticed and filed away and chosen not to examine too closely because she had told herself it wasn't her business. It was her business now. She picked up her phone, put it down, picked it up again. She had two choices. She could do what the voice asked and pretend none of this had happened and eventually extricate herself from Kim Jae-won's orbit quietly and go back to her life. Or she could tell him. She thought about what he had said to her at the end of their last conversation. Next time I'd like to tell you something true. She thought about his eyes, the tiredness in them that went deeper than sleep. She called him. He picked up on the second ring, which told her something she didn't have time to think about right now. Amanda, I need to see you, she said. Today, not at the penthouse. Somewhere else. And Jae-won. It was the first time she had used his name without the formal address, and she heard the slight shift in his breathing when she did. Come alone. They met at a small Nigerian restaurant on the south side that Amanda had been going to since her second month in Chicago. It was the kind of place that didn't have a website and didn't need one. The owner knew her by name and brought her pepper soup without being asked and looked at the man who came in behind her with the specific assessment of a woman who had seen everything and was not easily impressed. Jae-won sat across from her in a corner booth wearing a jacket that was significantly less expensive than his usual and still looked like it cost more than everything else in the room. He had come alone. No Minho. No Sung-jin. Just him. Amanda told him everything. She told it exactly as it happened, in the same way she did everything, directly, without performance, without collapsing into the fear of it even though the fear was there. She watched his face as she talked. It went very still. Not the polished stillness of the boardroom. A different kind. The kind that came before something moved. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment. How long ago, he said. 3 hours. His jaw tightened. You should have called me immediately. I needed to think first, she said. I needed to decide whether I trusted you enough to tell you. And I needed to decide that myself without pressure from anyone. He looked at her. And you decided. I decided, she said. But now you owe me what you promised. The truth. All of it. Because I am sitting across from you in a situation that apparently involves my immigration status being used as leverage, and I need to understand exactly what world I've walked into. The pepper soup arrived. The owner set it down, looked at Jae-won one more time, and left without a word. Jae-won looked at the table for a moment. Then he looked up at Amanda, and he told her, not everything. There were things that could not be said in a restaurant on the south side of Chicago, or anywhere else for that matter. But enough. He told her about the other side of KJW Global, about the networks and the arrangements, and the men in Seoul who had taught him how power actually worked before he was old enough to fully understand what he was being taught. He told her about the rival organization that had been circling his operations for 18 months, looking for a way in, looking for leverage. He told her that the man behind the voice on her phone almost certainly worked for a man named Dmitry Volkov, who had been trying to dismantle Jae-won's Chicago operation for the better part of a year. He told her in a level voice with his hands flat on the table and his eyes on her face the whole time, watching her process it, watching her decide what to do with it. She didn't flinch. She didn't get up and leave. She sat across from him and listened with the focused attention she gave everything, and when he finished, she was quiet for a moment. So I'm not actually in danger from your enemies, she said slowly. I'm in danger because your enemies think I'm important to you. Yes, he said. Am I? She said. Important to you. He held her gaze. Yes, he said. Simply. Without qualification. The same way she said things. Amanda looked at him for a long time. There was a version of this moment where she stood up and walked out and chose herself and her business and her uncomplicated Southside life over whatever this was. She knew that. She had already thought through that version in the 3 hours between the phone call and this conversation. What happens now, she said. I handle Volkov, he said. I should have moved against him 6 months ago. I was managing it too carefully. That stops now. And me? You'll have protection. Discreet. You won't see it, but it will be there. I don't want to be managed, Jae-won, she said firmly. I'm not one of your assets. I know that, he said immediately. That's not what I mean. I mean I will not let anything happen to you. That is a personal statement, not an operational one. She studied him. There's a difference for you? With you, he said quietly. There is only the personal. The restaurant hummed around them. Someone's phone played a Burna Boy song 2 tables over. The smell of her pepper soup rose between them, warm and familiar and achingly normal against the weight of what they had just said to each other. I need you to understand something, Amanda said. I didn't come to Chicago to be someone's vulnerability. I came here to build something. My business is my life's work. If being connected to you puts that at risk, it won't, he said. You don't know that. No, he admitted. But I know that I will do everything in my power to make sure of it. And I have considerable power, Amanda. I know you do, she said. That's exactly what worries me. He didn't have an answer for that. She respected him slightly more for not trying to manufacture one. I need a few days, she said finally. To think. Don't call me. Don't send booking requests. Just, she looked at him. Give me space to decide what I actually want. He nodded. Okay. Okay, she said. She picked up her spoon and started eating her pepper soup because she had been awake since 4:30 and she was hungry and the world could be complicated and dangerous and full of men who wanted to use her and men who looked at her like she was the only real thing they had encountered in years. But the soup was hot and it was good and some things remained constant. Jae-won watched her eat and said nothing and tried to remember the last time he had sat across from someone who made him feel like the most honest version of himself and came up with nothing. He moved on Volkov that same night. He called Sung-jin from the car on the way back and delivered instructions in the precise clipped sentences that Sung-jin had learned over 14 years meant that the patience phase was finished and the resolution phase had begun. Sung-jin listened without interrupting, and when Jae-won finished, there was a brief silence. She told you, Sung-jin said. She called me 3 hours after it happened. She called you, Sung-jin repeated slowly, and there was something in his voice. Don't, Jae-won said. I'm not saying anything, Sung-jin said. You're thinking very loudly. I'm thinking, Sung-jin said carefully, that a woman who gets a threatening phone call designed to shake her and spends 3 hours thinking it through quietly, and then calls you, and sits across from you and listens to the truth without running. He paused. I'm thinking that's not a common person. That's all I'm thinking. J1 looked out the window at the city moving past. Handle the Volkov situation, he said. All of it. Tonight we start. Already moving, Sungjin said. And the line went quiet. Victor Malov received no response from Amanda Okafor. He gave her 24 hours. Then 48. Then he called again. The number had been blocked. He sat with that information for a moment and then called his employer. She didn't comply, he said when Volkov answered. And Kim already knows. His people have been moving since last night. The silence on the other end was the kind that preceded very bad decisions. Then we moved to the contingency, Volkov said. Victor closed his eyes briefly. The contingency meant taking Amanda directly, using her as a physical bargaining chip rather than an unwitting tool. It was Messier. It was the kind of thing that created problems that outlasted the original objective. That escalates everything, Victor said carefully. It's already escalated, Volkov said. She chose him. Now she pays the price for that choice. Pick her up tomorrow morning. Early. Before she gets to work. Victor looked at his watch. It was 11:47 p.m. Amanda Okafor was somewhere in this city with no idea that tomorrow morning had just become the most dangerous morning of her life. If your heart is racing right now, then good, because that means the story is doing exactly what it should. Hit that like button, subscribe, and drop a comment. Did Amanda make the right choice telling him? Because everything comes down to tomorrow morning. Amanda woke at 4:30 the next morning the same way she always did. Not because of an alarm. Her body had learned the hour over 5 years of early mornings and pre-dawn prep work until it had simply become the time she existed at. She lay in the dark for a moment, staring at the ceiling of her apartment, thinking about everything and nothing simultaneously the way you do when your life has gotten complicated faster than you had a plan for. She thought about the phone call, about the restaurant, about the way J1 had looked at her across that table and told her the truth with his hands flat and his eyes steady and nothing performed about any of it. She thought about what Chisholm had said. Asterisk, be careful, Amanda. Men like that don't operate simply. Asterisk. She thought about her mother who called every Sunday and expected to hear that everything was fine. She got up, made tea, stood at her kitchen window and watched the city begin its slow gray awakening and tried to figure out what she actually wanted. Not what was safe. Not what was sensible. What she actually wanted underneath all of it. She knew the answer. She had known it for a while. She just hadn't been ready to say it out loud, even to herself. She picked up her phone and looked at it. J1 had done what she asked. No calls. No messages. Just silence that somehow communicated more than words would have. She set the phone down and went to get dressed for work. She didn't see them until she was outside. It was 5:47 in the morning. The street was quiet the way city streets are quiet before the world fully wakes up. A few early commuters, a delivery truck idling at the corner, the particular stillness of pre-dawn Chicago in autumn. Amanda had her bag over one shoulder and her keys in her hand, and she was thinking about what she needed to pick up from the wholesale supplier before her first delivery when the black car pulled up. It happened fast. 2 men. The door opening before the car fully stopped. A hand on her arm that was firm but not violent. The kind of grip that communicated very clearly that resistance would simply result in a firmer grip. Don't make noise, the man said quietly. We're just going for a drive. Amanda's heart was hammering, but her mind was doing something else entirely. It was going very calm and very clear the way it did under pressure. The same clarity she felt in a kitchen when everything was happening at once, and there was no room for panic, only for precise sequential thinking. She looked at the man holding her arm. Then she looked at the car. Then she looked at the street. And then every single thing happened at once. 3 cars appeared from opposite ends of the street simultaneously, moving fast and stopping hard in a coordinated block that sealed the black car completely. Men were out of the vehicles before they fully stopped, moving with the kind of practiced efficiency that was nothing like police and nothing like ordinary security. Sungjin came out of the lead car personally, which told Amanda everything about the seriousness of what was happening. The grip on her arm vanished instantly. The 2 men looked at the number of people now surrounding them and made the only rational calculation available to them. It was over in under 90 seconds. Amanda stood on the pavement with her bag still on her shoulder and her keys still in her hand and her heart doing something complicated in her chest. Sungjin reached her in 4 strides and looked her over with a sharp professional assessment. Are you hurt? He said. No, she said. Her voice was completely steady. She was almost surprised by that. Good. He turned and said something rapid and quiet to the men behind him. Then he turned back to her. We need to get you somewhere safe while we finish this. Where is he? Amanda said. Sungjin looked at her. He's finishing it. J1 had been awake the entire night. Not because he couldn't sleep. Because there was no time for sleep. From 11:47 p.m. to 5:45 a.m., he had moved through a sequence of decisions and communications and arrangements with the focused precision of a man who had spent 15 years building an empire specifically, so that when moments like this arrived, he had the machinery to respond to them completely. Volkov had made his mistake the moment he chose Amanda. J1 had been managing the Volkov situation with deliberate patience for 18 months, choosing strategy over force, containment over confrontation, because he was a careful man who understood that the most sustainable victories were the ones achieved without unnecessary destruction. That calculation had changed the moment Amanda called him from a restaurant on the south side and told him about the phone call in a steady voice that should not have been steady given what she was describing. Volkov had reached outside the boundaries of their world and touched someone who had nothing to do with any of it. That was a line, and lines meant the patience was finished. By 3 a.m. J1's people had located Volkov's Chicago Operations Center. By 4 a.m. they had documented enough to make Volkov's position in the city permanently untenable through channels that would cause him significantly more lasting damage than physical confrontation. By 5 a.m. 3 separate communications had been sent to parties in New York, Seoul, and Moscow who had their own complicated relationships with Dmitry Volkov and who received the information J1 provided with great interest. Volkov's operation didn't end with violence. It ended with isolation, with the systematic removal of every alliance and protection he had in the city, with the quiet, efficient severing of every network he depended on until he was standing in Chicago with no foundation under him. By the time Victor Malov's men reached Amanda's street, their employer was already making emergency calls that nobody was answering. J1 was in his car 2 blocks from Amanda's apartment when Sungjin's message came through. Asterisk, she's safe. She's asking for you. Asterisk. He read those 3 words twice. She's asking for you. He told his driver to move. They brought her to a safe house that was significantly nicer than the phrase safe house implied. A townhouse on the north side, warm and well-furnished, the kind of place that revealed the difference between people who arranged security as a luxury and people who arranged it as a necessity. Amanda was sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of tea that someone had made for her and her hands wrapped around it when J1 came through the door. She looked up. He crossed the room and stopped in front of her and looked at her face with an intensity that was not his boardroom intensity or his empire-building intensity. It was something rawer than that, something that had been stripped of all the careful management. "You're okay," he said. It came out like something that had been held very tightly and was now being released. "I'm okay," she confirmed. She studied his face. He looked like a man who had been awake all night making war on her behalf and was only now allowing himself to feel what had driven him to do it. "Sit down, J1. You look terrible." A sound came out of him that was almost a laugh. He pulled out the chair across from her and sat, and looked at her across the table the same way he had looked at her across the table in the restaurant, and this time there was nothing unsaid between them. Everything was on the surface. Everything was visible. "I'm sorry," he said. "You were pulled into something that should never have touched you. That is my responsibility, and I'm sorry." "You didn't make that phone call," Amanda said. "My world made it necessary." She was quiet for a moment. She looked down at her tea. Then she looked up. "Is it finished?" "Volkov is finished in this city," he said. "Permanently. Not just contained. Finished." She nodded slowly. "And the rest of it? Your world. The parts that aren't on Forbes." He held her gaze. "I've been building the legitimate side of my operations for years. Deliberately. What I built in the beginning was what I had the tools to build then. What I'm building now is different." A pause. "I won't pretend I can walk away from everything overnight, but I can show you the direction I'm moving, if you're willing to see it." Amanda looked at him for a long time. This was the moment. She understood that. This was the exact moment that she had been moving toward since a Tuesday morning in a marble lobby when she had given a man in an expensive suit a single nod of acknowledgement and walked past him without a second thought. Everything since then had been the universe patiently constructing the circumstances that led to this kitchen table in a North Side townhouse at 6:30 in the morning. She thought about what she had decided standing at her kitchen window before everything happened. What she actually wanted underneath all of it. "I'm going to need you to understand something about me," she said. "Tell me," he said immediately. "I don't need to be rescued. I don't need to be protected like something fragile. I don't need your money or your connections or your penthouse or any of it." She held his gaze steadily. "What I need, if this is going to be anything, is honesty. Consistent, uncomfortable, complete honesty. About who you are and what you're doing and where you're going. I can handle the truth. What I cannot handle is being managed." "I know," he said. "And I need you to respect what I'm building," she continued. "Okafor Kitchen is mine. I built it myself. I don't want your contracts as a favor. If we use each other professionally, it's because the work is good enough to stand on its own." "Which it is." "It is," he said. "That's not in question." "And my mother," Amanda said, and something in her voice softened just slightly on that word. "She calls every Sunday. She's going to have opinions." Something crossed J1's face then. Something warm and unguarded and completely unlike anything she had seen on him before. "I'd like to hear about her," he said quietly. Amanda looked at him, at the tiredness in his eyes that was beginning to lift just slightly, at the man underneath the empire, the one she had been catching glimpses of in kitchens and across restaurant tables, and in the careful way he said her name, at the person who had spent an entire night dismantling a threat to her safety and walked through the door looking like the only thing he needed to confirm was that she was breathing. "She makes better jollof than me," Amanda said, "and she will absolutely tell you that to your face." This time he actually smiled, fully, without managing it or containing it. It changed his entire face, and Amanda felt something settle in her chest like something that had been waiting a long time to land. "I look forward to it," he said. She reached across the table and put her hand over his. "Just for a moment. Just enough." "The direction you're moving," she said. "Show me." He turned his hand over and held hers. "I will," he said. "I promise." 3 months later, Okafor Kitchen catered its largest event to date, for 100 guests. A charity gala organized by the KJW Global Foundation at a venue on the lakefront that had been written about in 3 separate Chicago lifestyle publications the following week. 2 of those publications mentioned the food specifically. One of them ran a full sidebar on Okafor Kitchen and the woman behind it. Amanda read the article sitting at the counter of her new commercial kitchen space, which was 3 times the size of her old one and smelled like the egusi soup she was developing for a new menu. Chisholm was somewhere behind her, making the specific kind of noise that meant she was reading over Amanda's shoulder. "They called you a revelation," Chisholm said. "They called the food a revelation," Amanda corrected. "Same thing," Chisholm said. She leaned on the counter and looked at her friend sideways. "How's he doing?" Amanda's phone buzzed on the counter. She looked at it. A message from J1. 4 words. "Dinner tonight? I'm cooking." Amanda stared at that for a moment. Then she typed back. "You don't cook." His response came immediately. "I've been learning. Sung Jin says it's a disaster. Come and judge for yourself." Amanda laughed. Out loud. The kind of laugh that comes from somewhere genuinely light. Chisholm looked at her with an expression that was equal parts delight and satisfaction. "He's learning to cook," Amanda said. Chisholm covered her mouth with both hands. Amanda typed back. "I'll be there at 7. I'm bringing you Ziza leaf." She set the phone down and went back to her soup. Outside the window, Chicago moved and hummed and carried on in the way that cities do, indifferent to the small, enormous things that happen inside them. Somewhere across town, a man who had spent his entire adult life building walls was learning to make jollof rice badly, and apparently without any shame about the fact that he was doing it badly. Her phone buzzed one more time. "I already bought the Uziza leaf." I remembered. Amanda read that twice. Felt that thing settle in her chest again. The same thing that had been settling there with increasing permanence over 3 months of honest conversations and slow Sundays and a video call with her mother in Lagos that had lasted 2 hours and ended with her mother saying, in Igbo, with the particular tone that communicated both approval and warning simultaneously, "He has good eyes. But you watch those eyes carefully." Amanda had laughed and said, "Yes, Mama." She was watching. She was watching all of it with both eyes open and her hands on her own life and her name on her own business and her feet on ground she had built herself. And it was good. It was really, genuinely, beautifully good. She stirred her soup and smiled and let it be good. And that is how a Korean billionaire L met the only woman who didn't want his money or him, and discovered that she was the only thing that made him want to become someone worth wanting. If this story moved you, if you felt every single moment of it, then you know what to do. Hit that like button, share this video with someone who needs a great story today, and subscribe so you never miss what comes next on this channel. Drop a comment below and tell me, what was your favorite moment in this entire story? Was it the hook? The restaurant scene? The kitchen conversations? The ending? I want to know. And to everyone who stayed from the very first word all the way to this moment, thank you. You are exactly the audience this channel was made for. See you in the next one.